Good evening, everybody. How's it going? My name is Todd Scholl. I serve as the lead learner for the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves COOL for short. That's CEWL. And you can learn everything you want to know about us right here on this website at cool.us. That's CEWL.us. And there you'll find all of our past live streams, all the videos that our members are creating, like Pete Stone's Cool Vibes. We have Alex Del Castillo's yoga videos. We've got Steve Newsom's writing. We've got all of the information about our Cool Induction Institute, including our Cool Coaching program led by the wonderful and talented Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder. So again, visit us at cool.us to learn more about who we are at the Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. Well, tonight is a very special presentation. We have a very special guest with us. Her name is Sylvia Wright. And if you are in South Carolina and you're in education, you've probably heard her name already. She is a veteran educator with more than 20 years of experience serving students in schools across the country. She holds degrees from Fayetteville State University, Columbia College, Texas Tech University. Her Red Raiders are in the playoffs, by the way, and the Citadel, including multiple master's degrees and a specialist in educational leadership, preparing her for superintendency. She is currently pursuing her doctorate in educational practice and innovation at the University of South Carolina. Go Gamecocks. A military spouse, Sylvia has taught English and social studies at the secondary level in multiple states, served as an adjunct history professor, and taken on leadership roles, including the department chair, AVID coordinator, instructional coach, and district secondary coordinator. Her work is focused on improving instruction, supporting educators, and building systems that raise student achievement. Deeply committed to community service, she has also served with the Greater St. James AME Church, the Tri-County Exchange Club Education Committee, and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And now, after all of that, she is running for South Carolina State Superintendent of Education, bringing a broad perspective, a heart for service, and a deep dedication to strengthening public education across the state. You can learn more about Sylvia's campaign at Sylvia 2026 SC. .com. Let me pull that. Let me pull that website up so you can see it. So it's not Sylvia. Sorry, it is Wright 2026 SC.com. That's Wright 2026 SC.com. So I am thrilled to death to bring on our guest tonight. Welcome to the show, Sylvia. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. And that was an amazing introduction.
Thank you. Now, you and I met maybe a year and a half ago at the ESP conference that the SCEA was did, and we had a wonderful conversation. I was really enthusiastic about your vision. So I want to just thank you for being on the show tonight and sharing a little bit about who you are and why you're running and what your vision is for education in South Carolina. And folks who are watching, if you're tuned in, you are more than welcome to bring on comments and questions, and Sylvia will either answer them or ignore them at her discretion. The first question I have for you is, you have 3 master's degrees, and when I read your bio, I was like, holy cow, 3 master's degrees. I'm wondering, did any of those take you 6 months?
No. More than that.
More than 6 months for each one.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So not only do you have master's degrees, but each one of those master's degrees, I assume, took the normal length of time and wasn't expedited
Right.
for
Almost
you.
2 years.
Okay. No offense to anybody else, but I just had to get that little dig in. So let's start with who you are, because I think when people go to vote, yeah, I do think they vote on issues. But I think there's something in the limbic system. There's something about how they feel about a person, and they want to trust somebody and know that this is somebody that I feel like I can sort of trust with my vote. So let's just start off talking a little bit about you. Who is Sylvia Wright, your background, and tell folks what you'd like to know, that would
Awesome.
like them to know.
I love that. Okay, so have you ever seen the movie 13 Going on 30?
I have not.
Okay, so that's one of my all-time favorite movies.
Okay.
So Jenna Rink, and there are 2 things that I want to pull from that relate to my life, because I want to start with, Sylvia in school, because what happened in school is kind of what inspired me as a teacher. or to become the teacher that I became. But Jenna Rink, she wanted to fit in. And so she changed who she was, or tried to change who she was to fit in. But, if you see this movie, there was magic dust sprinkled on this, dollhouse, and she wished to be 30. But when she became 30 and was in the in crowd, she realized that's not who she was. And I bring that up because while I was in school, I tried to be someone who I wasn't, to try to fit in. It wasn't until I got older that I realized that I didn't have to try to fit in with anyone. I'm unique the way I am. And so that's what I instill in my students. When I see them trying to fit in, I emphasize the fact that you are who you are. You do not have to be like anyone else. And the second thing from that movie is, once Jenna realized that that's not who she was, that person, she went back to her childhood home and looked for that dollhouse in this closet down, she knew exactly where it was because she was able to go back to a childhood home. Well, I'm a military kid. And so we moved like 3 times, and I don't have a childhood home like that. So I know how it feels when, people feel displaced. Like when students feel displaced, I can relate to that. Because part of, being a military kid, I didn't feel like I belonged. And that also fed into the first part of trying to fit in. So I can relate to kids or students. And so I say that because as a teacher, again, I wanted to be that person that students could talk to, could come to, because I understand where they're coming from.
Right.
And then continuing with childhood in that frame, my parents are servant leaders. Service is like the backbone of our family. My dad, of course, military. My mom worked for Bell South, but in her off time, she was always volunteering for things. I remember people, like kids from the neighborhood, coming in the backyard, and we'd have Big A. It was like Bible study for kids. When we were at church, my mom was over Vacation Bible School, children's church. So she was always serving. She adopted Grandma Mary. She's this blind, old, elderly lady, but Mom adopted her. And so we treated her just like she was our grandma. We would go to her beep ball games, and, the ball would beep, and, they would hit the ball and then actually, round the bases. It was, my mom has a heart for service. And so I carry that because that's how we were raised, to serve. So when I say that I'm a servant leader, I legitimately was raised for service.
So is that desire to serve, is that what was the major call for you when you decided? I mean, it's a huge decision to run for a state office like this, to get yourself into politics, I think is incredibly courageous, especially in this time and era in this state, to put yourself out there, knowing that no matter what you say, you're going to get critiques from all different angles. Is it that service that drew you into it, or are there other reasons?
Well, service drew me into being a teacher. And so, to be honest with you, I never wanted to leave the classroom. But as I started moving up in leadership positions like department leader and school coordinator, I started seeing outside of the classroom. And so that kind of sparked or moved me towards leadership. And I was thinking more district office level, like making improvements at the district level for, whatever area I served. But then my grandson was born. And so that was the catalyst, because that's a question I get all the time. Like, why now? My grandson actually helped me get my head out of the sand, because I was focused on my district, improving, my area. For example, when I was in Dorchester 4, when I was the instructional coach, we took the student data, actually created an intervention plan. I worked with teachers. It was all hands on deck. We had town hall meetings. Our school actually went up 13 points because of the intervention, that we all worked together to, help improve. But the reason why I bring that up is because that's where my mind was, helping the students and teachers, that area. But when my grandson was born, I actually started thinking about, where I wanted to send, or where I would like for my daughter to send my grandson. And my grandson, he loves reading, because we started reading to him immediately when he was born, right? And since then, and he asks questions. He's only 3 years old. He will ask you questions. He can say complete sentences. It might be like simple sentences, but he can say that. But I want my grandson to go to a school that will elevate his level of learning. And so I started thinking of other kids as well. Every kid deserves to go to a school that will elevate their level of learning. So that's sort of what sparked this superintendency. The thought came to my mind to be a superintendent of education. So I immediately researched what the requirements were, because I'm that person. I like to know what exactly I'm getting myself into. So research, and I'm like, this is what I've been doing as a leader. So
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things that I love when I was reading your website, speaking of your grandson, and I think about I have a daughter who's in high school still, and I share a very similar type of view around, like, my passion for education advocacy is really around young people, and my parents kind of started me on that path, and my kids kind of really, and my students really drove me further to want to do more. And one of the things you said, and one of your top priorities, is the whole child approach to learning. And people say that, throw that term around a lot, whole child. What do you mean by a whole child approach to learning?
Thank you for that, because this one means so much to me. So we think of everything in silos right now. What happens at school happens at school. What happens at home is at home. What happens in the community. That's not the case. Everything that happens, it's all connected. For example, if a family is homeless, right? If a mom doesn't know where her child is going to, or if the child doesn't know where they're coming home to each day, do you think they're focused on school? No. So there was this program that I was introduced to in Charleston County called Communities in Schools. And with Communities in Schools, they connect community resources to help the child. So if a child doesn't have food at the house, they give food bags. If they don't have access to healthcare or dental cleanings, they provide that. There was a big van or like a RV bus that came to the school that provided those services for the child and the parent. If a parent didn't have a job, they could help provide those community resources to get that job. So the reason why I bring that up is because if we can support the parent, right, the community, bring the community in, support the parent, that can support the child, and then the child can be that student, be that child, and focus in the classroom. So everything is interconnected.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by the whole child.
Absolutely. And I love how you talk about prioritizing social emotional learning and self-regulation, because that's something that's so near and dear to my heart. And for me, if we're prioritizing that, it starts also with every adult in the building learning to prioritize their own social emotional learning and self-regulation. And I just finished teaching a course with Columbia College called Classroom Wellbeing with Yelena Popovich. We co-facilitated that course. And it was really interesting that the people who were taking the course were, they're learning about being trauma informed, and they hadn't really thought about, oh, I really need to, if I'm going to do this effectively with young people, I need to know about my own inner life, my own social emotional life. So I really like that. And I also like some of the other things you want to do for our teachers. Can you talk a little bit about the enhanced tax credit and childcare vouchers, that idea that you have for educators?
Yes, but really quickly, I wanted to go back to
Sure.
just follow up on your comment. Is
Please.
If we can't take care of ourselves, then it's going to be harder to take care of our students. I remember a situation when I was teaching, things weren't going well at home and then at school. And so my level of frustration elevated, right? And I found myself taking it out on my students. And that's when I paused. I'm like, wait a minute. The students didn't do anything to deserve this. This is all what's happening with me. So I need to check myself. And that's where that emotional, regulation comes in, that awareness that you're talking about. But that's through growth, though. And so I like the fact that you're talking about this class from Columbia College, because when I talk about SEL in my plan, it's not just for students, it's for teachers as well, because we all have to first we have to look out for ourselves first,
And
right?
SEL, I don't know how it got lumped in with
No.
Marxism or whatever. It really it's a terrible disservice because it is
Mhm.
so foundational. And in fact, I was having conversation with other colleagues this week about how AI is going to impact
Mm.
education. And one of the things in several reports, and folks who are a lot smarter than I am, who know about AI in education, talk about the importance of that social emotional skills, that social emotional learning is going to be a critical piece, because as AI sort of takes over some of the tasks that we used to train young people on for a career,
Mhm.
they're those human elements, the
Mhm.
that those they call
Soft
them soft
skills.
skills,
Skills, yeah.
but those skills are going to be absolutely highlighted and necessary,
Yes.
because AI is going to struggle with that, to those
Yes.
human elements.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
So
Okay.
so so
Yes.
if it, please feel free to direct this conversation, and don't necessarily follow my lead, but I think, being that we're doing this through the SCEA's channels, I imagine that there are probably a good number of educators
Okay.
who are tuned in. And there was a question, but I want to wait till Bridget, I want to wait till your question is in the sort of, I don't want to like veer off these topics yet, but I will try to get your question, Bridget Fowler. Thank you for tuning in. But the question was, uh, your platform around what you want to do to help recruit and retain high quality teachers. One of those things is this enhanced tax credit and childcare vouchers. Can you talk about that?
Right. So for the tax credit, I was thinking, if we want to retain teachers, one way that we can create a competitive package would be a tax credit. Give teachers money back. They talk about with the whole vouchers, this, giving people money back if they send their kids to private school. Why don't we do that? Instead of the private school, apply that for teachers. They get
Right.
that money back. And for the child care credit, you know, again, another part of a competitive package, offering free childcare for teachers. And
Yeah.
I know some things have been piloted at schools, like they have daycares at
Hmm.
schools.
Yeah.
So I would like to see, more of that too, but just have those conversations. When I wrote, my ideas down, my vision, I it's sort of like a draft, because I also want to hear what the teachers want, because some of them, it might not be they need childcare, um, or a tax credit. What do teachers want? So I said that because I don't
Hmm.
want people to look at my website and think that's it. I'm locked into just those ideas. That's just a draft of my vision.
I
I
think
want
that,
to hear.
sorry, go ahead. I was going to
Oh,
say
go ahead.
that ties in, though, when we talk about creating a humane school system. Then this idea that you forfeit your parenthood,
Right.
when you enter the teaching profession, even though you're going into a place where there's all these kids.
Yeah.
And you're right there. I know of a school in Aiken that has a daycare center for their teachers, and I
Mhm.
think the teachers pay a little bit into it, but it's not. It's very
Right.
affordable in comparison to, a lot of times it's not worth the amount that they're paying in daycare, isn't worth them,
Right.
going to work. So, and it's the right thing to do, and it's like
Right.
a humane thing to do. So I love that idea, and I love the idea of the tax credit as well. And the other thing that I really loved, before I get into the discipline stuff, was you talked about establishing a $35 an hour rate
Mm.
for professional development and for meetings that take place before and after work hours. And I think that is going to sound like, a wonderful thing to a lot of educators who are often, under the guise of other duties as assigned, forced to do things after hours, or forced to do professional development on their own time,
Right.
and aren't being compensated for it. So can you talk about that?
Yes. So when I was the district coordinator for Dorchester 4, I remember at the high school, the high school schedule is different from the middle school schedule. We had time to schedule, during the day and meet together as a team, whether it's, your, subject level or grade level. But the high school, it's a little different because everyone's schedule's all over the place. So in order to have professional development meetings, they would have to either meet with me before school or after school. And it was before their contracted time, before they were, supposed to be in. And so I thought to myself, that's so unfair. But I know the training was valuable, but they need to be compensated for that because it's taking their their time outside of those hours.
Right.
So that's why, and the $35 was just like a base pay, just something. I know teachers deserve way more than that, but I think $35 something. It's a start to show that, hey, we appreciate your time. For
Right.
So
well, it also creates an incentive for the district and for the administration not to schedule things outside of that time. It says unless it's going to be really important, we don't want to spend our budget on meetings that aren't truly necessary. And that happens. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in my career, 15 years in the classroom, where we had faculty meetings that would go on for till 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. And you're wanting to get home to your family and you're not being compensated, and the paycheck's still the same. And I think that is a form of exploitation and a sort of a loose end that we need to tie up for teachers. The other thing, and for all staff, really, for support staff as well.
Oh yes, I was a coach, so I know.
Yeah. You talk about the discipline problem, and strengthening discipline policies to protect teachers. Here's an issue that I think is really complex and is really challenging in terms of, you hear a lot of teachers saying, I hear a lot of teachers saying, discipline is my major issue. And then you also have this component of, I want to teach the whole child, and I want to have SEL, and I want to be trauma informed, and I want to use maybe restorative practices or something like that. I mean, it's sometimes I think there can be competing narratives. How do you bridge that together in your mind as a school leader to say, we're going to hold kids accountable, but we're also going to do it in a way that's psychologically healthy?
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a great question. So when I think of discipline, I think, first of all, you've heard of how the teacher was shot in the hand and then, it lodged into her chest. I think about that because she asked for help. She was crying out like, hey, there were signs and they were ignored. So when I talk about strengthening the discipline policy, we need to strengthen. If a teacher is saying this, if a child is exhibiting this behavior, there needs to be something in place where there's a conversation, where there's counseling, something. And the second part to that is, after a child commits an act of whatever, instead of just suspending them, because if I go back to my childhood as well, I wasn't the best kid in school. So I had OSS and ISS, and all I remember is having just sit in a room. There was no follow-up. There was no, Sylvia, this is what you did. How can you improve on this? There was no conversations. Right. So to answer your question, that's what I want to, part of that discipline policy, part of my Safe Schools initiative, having something in place where students can, after they've, committed whatever, they're held accountable, not just, the penal, but also conversation. What's going on? How can we improve the next time? How can we do better? What's wrong? What's going on? Because behavior is motivated by something. Kids don't just act a certain way. Every behavior is motivated by something. So we need to find out what's happening. What are the root causes? So in order to do that, you have to have conversations. And I feel like that's something that's missing.
Right. We got to figure out what's going on, because all behaviors are communication, right? It's a communication of something, of some type of need that's not being met, especially when it's a maladaptive behavior. And the hard part is, I think it's just educators are in this really tough spot of wanting to do things really appropriately, and then you've got 28 other kids in the class,
right?
And all these demands, all this paperwork and meetings and duty and stuff. And it's really difficult to find the time to really have that conversation. So like you said, in your platform, you talk about bringing in more more social workers, more guidance counselors,
Right.
more school
Right.
psychologists, because those are the
Mhm.
people that not only can have the conversation, but can have it effectively and can
That's right.
take that off the plate of the educator
That's
who
right.
doesn't have the time to do it.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yes, sir.
Um, you and I talked a little bit at that conference about standardized testing, the role of standardized testing.
Mm,
Folks who know me know that my big issue is that we not only test too much, but that we place too much emphasis on standardized testing, that it should be a diagnostic tool that we use to inform our instruction
right.
rather than a punishment tool for teachers and students or schools that might be really the issue is socioeconomic conditions and not
Right.
necessarily the quality of the school system. Talk a little bit about your ideas around standardized testing.
So, if I'm being honest, I want to get rid of that end of the year standardized testing because we get that data, what, in August? So, you know, it's like you said, we're testing kids just to test them at that point.
Right.
But I know there's an argument of, okay, well then how are we going to know progress? We already are using, iReady or some form of iReady where kids are tested at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. So why can't we just form some type of, you know, metric around that to help determine where kids need assistance, how they're growing? Because that's the goal. Testing that data is supposed to inform us of how we can help kids grow. It shouldn't be punishing schools like, oh, your school has an F because these kids aren't meeting the standard or whatever. Okay, if they're not
Mm,
meeting the standard, then let's dig deeper. What's happening? Because it's
right.
not always it's not always something that's happening in the classroom.
Yeah,
And
it seems silly to me to wait until basically
yeah,
they've started the next grade and now you're getting the data and
right,
you don't know what they've lost over the 4 or 5 months since they took the test and whether they've matured, whatever.
that's
You
right,
don't really know because you're kind of blind at that point. So you're really just keeping score of what happened last year.
right,
It has really doesn't have to me any meaningful.
that's right,
It doesn't meaningfully help this child moving forward. It's really just more of like an accountability system and like you said, we can do that in other ways. I
right.
think what happens is we end up myopically focusing on sort of artificially inflating these test
Yes.
scores. We also do the same thing with, in my opinion, with graduation rates and SAT scores. In
Hmm.
fact, I'm not going to say where, but I know folks who have they'll just not they'll tell kids don't take the SAT or ACT who they know aren't going to do well on it, and then magically their scores go up 10% the next year, and then they act like it was some big deal when all it was
Right.
just a manipulation of who took the test.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm saying like it's the testing has become this problematic sort of
Yes.
entity on the system that actually doesn't it does it just it ends up doing a disservice, and the
Yes.
public thinks it's the only way we can keep people accountable, but it's not. Like there's
It's
other
not.
ways. What are
There
some
is.
other ways that you would suggest that we have an accountability? I think we all agree we have to have an accountability system for tax dollars that are being spent, but how do we have one that takes into account um, things other than those narrow sets of skills that are tested on bubble and test?
Right. My thing is like project-based learning. I'm more of hands-on. Uh, I attended a workforce development, this council that's been created to, talk about how we can improve CTE, the career and technical schools, how we can, for example, spread or the model CTE programs. How can we disperse those and make them more accessible to, other areas? But the reason why I bring that up is because that's another metric. How are we preparing kids to be successful once they graduate? Because this whole focus on grades, it's how is it benefiting the child after
Right,
graduation?
right,
So I would like to shift our focus to more of, for example, creating pathways that prepare them for success after they graduate and start at elementary and middle, introducing them to careers. Did you know there are over 800 careers in South Carolina, or over 800 occupations? So I'm a systems thinker. I'm a systems person. When you see an airplane, what do you think of when you see an airplane as far as jobs?
I think of pilot and
Pilot, right?
stewardess. Yeah.
Stewardess. Just that, just that, right? But
Yeah.
what about the people who built the planes?
Right.
What about the people at the airport? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The executives, the custodians, all that. There's so many jobs, right? So we need to expose kids to what's available to them, especially in South Carolina.
Right.
At the elementary level, middle school level. So then when they get to the high school level, they'll have some type of idea, and it doesn't have to be locked down. Have some type of idea where they want to go, what they want to do, and then they have pathways to get to that. So if they want to go into the military, their pathway prepares them for the ASVAB. If there's a certified job that they need to go into, or that they want to go into, their pathway prepares them to get that certification and everything that they need. So that's where my focus is. It's not necessarily on grades. It's how can we prepare our kids to be successful in whatever they want to do. But they also need to be able to explore what's out there, so that way they can make an informed decision.
I have at least three more questions. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Are we good? Are you good on time? Are you good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my next question is, I am a huge nerd when it comes to artificial intelligence. I make SOAR 2 videos. I make Suno music. I do image stuff. I use it as my quasi nurse practitioner, my therapist, whatever. I use AI all the time, and there are folks out there, very influential and credible people, who are sort of sounding the alarms around artificial intelligence. And one of the areas that it's going to impact, of course, is education, because if we continue to prepare our kids the way we have,
right,
that future is not going to, when your grandson, graduates from high school, college, the future is going to look so much different because of artificial intelligence and quantum computing. What would you do as state superintendent of education around the issue of artificial intelligence to ensure that our schools are aligned with preparing our kids for what's coming?
Well, the first thing is policy. We need some type of policies, not only for how to utilize AI, but how to protect children from the dangers of AI. Because I actually attend a monthly AI roundtable. I haven't been, in a while because of campaigning, but in this roundtable, we had that discussion about the people who know about these dangers of AI. There's no regulation or anything stopping them right now. And we don't even know what those dangers are. So one of the things that I want to do is create like an AI collaborative and get people who I know, or who like from this roundtable, we've already had discussions, and they're from all over the country, actually all over the world, because there's some people from New Zealand in this meeting. But people that I know who've already been working in the AI space, having these conversations, creating regulations, combating, what these negatives are, so that way we can be on top of that to protect the children, teachers, And there was another thought that I had too about AI, but it just escaped me. But the major thing is creating those policies to protect our children. Critical thinking. That was the other conversation that we had. That is how we can combat AI or stay on top of AI. That's why critical thinking is very important. Yeah. So critical thinking in the curriculum, programs like AVID, for example, that incorporate curriculum, or their curriculum incorporates critical thinking, things like that. That's what I want to make sure is available in every school, because I want to emphasize critical thinking in order to combat, or not combat really, but prepare students for this future of AI. Because you're right. I've been to for example, BMW manufacturing plant, and I've seen how robots and machines, this AI, work together with, humans. And that's the future. So
Yeah,
we've
if
got to
you
prepare them for that.
you look at the advances in robotics coming our
Hmm.
way, and then anybody who's been on ChatGPT or has used uh, AI, no matter what you're using, Claude or whatever, uh, it's it's so powerful already, and this is the worst it will ever be, and it's going to get exponentially better. Then you add quantum computing into that, and it
Right.
makes sense. I'm very concerned about the future for kids. You talk about the 800 professions. I'm wondering how many of those will still be available to them. And also, it's not even what's available, but then the leverage that they'll have if they're so somebody put it this way, Tristan Harris, who is the co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology and worked at Google. He said,
Mm.
imagine that there's millions of immigrants that are moving into your country, and they're all Nobel Prize winning level geniuses. They're also willing to work for less than minimum wage, never take a day off,
Mm.
don't need any benefits. Imagine that coming in. What would that be like in terms of your leverage, like trying to get a job and trying to advocate for higher pay and working conditions? It's really going to be difficult for future generations to compete with that. And I think so. This is why I think it's critical for us to consider shifting to the things that make us uniquely human that are going to be really difficult to replicate. So,
Yep.
for example, if I watch my son play cello, I don't wanna watch a robot play cello. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't wanna I mean, only out of fascination would I want to see a painting from a robot, but I don't really
Mhm.
want a painting from a robot. I don't wanna go and watch a play with a bunch of robots. I mean, maybe one time, but, like, there's a human element to the arts, to certain care, the way we give care, therapy, things like that, that you just it's difficult to
Mhm.
digitally. So I think those things need to be focused upon. Um,
I
my
agree. And
my
part of my plan includes arts integration and language immersion programs. One of the things I want to bring to different school or bring to public school are more programs. That's part of like those pathways. Because right now I feel
yeah,
like we operate in like this single, you know,
right,
space. But
right,
arts integration is definitely part of my priorities.
awesome. My next question is going to be is a little bit challenging, and feel free to
Okay.
pass. We didn't talk about this, but it came to my mind when uh, when in the last round of in the 2022 race for superintendent of education, there was a lot of there were a lot of issues that were brought up that I felt were just bogus. So
Hmm.
one of the big ones was critical race theory.
Mm,
You heard that from the other side. CRT, there's CRT in our school. Critical
yeah.
race theory, CRT, 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 CRT. Watch out, there's a CRT. And then when a certain person was elected, I said, wow, it was really quick how we got rid of that CRT. How quickly that just went away once somebody else was elected. Um, and there was the Marxism, there's the
Mm,
groomers, there's the they're putting litter boxes in schools, and there's all this b mm, mm,
right.
all this
Right.
junk that's out there that's not true. As we look to this 2026 race, you're in it. You
Yes.
know those kind of attacks are coming.
Hmm.
What do you anticipate coming towards you, and how will you handle that differently than maybe other candidates in the past have?
Well, I agree with you because they're going to come with the same, you know, the same lines. But I just want to focus on the facts. Focus on what Ellen Weaver has not done. Focus on the failure of public education. Well, not failure of public education, but the failure to focus and improve public education. Because her focus was more of charter schools and vouchers. So if you look at, for example, the data from students in special education, 70 to 80% of students who receive special education services are reading below grade level. And that's been like that. Why, she says promises made, promises kept. But then I look at these groups that that there's still disparity in several of the student groups. So what are we doing? What has she done to help students, in these groups? Because the data shows us, and it's been like that. If you look at the data, 2022 data to now,
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm saying that is I'm going to focus on what hasn't been done.
Right.
And how I'm going to come in and make sure it gets done, have those conversations. There's so many great things in the works in the Department of Education. For example, the innovative class that I was talking about, how we merge careers with our instructional, our basic instructional curriculum. For example, when I was the district coordinator, I merged logistics with English 3. And I created that curriculum, or set up that curriculum, but the teacher was responsible for the instructional strategies, whatever activities she wanted to do. It gave the teacher more autonomy. So, but this right now is an innovative, it's a pilot for just special education. But I want to expand that to general education. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because we have things that are in place, but we just need leadership to carry it on, to improve the system. Because right now, the leadership that we have is not focused on improving the public education system. And that's proven by because your actions.
What I've seen take place is money that's being shifted to private schools. And when that whole initiative started, it was under the auspices of, we're going to help these poor kids get out of failing public schools. Right. And then, of course, when the rubber meets the road, what ends up happening is you start expanding that, you start increasing the sort of family income threshold where you qualify for this voucher. And my argument has always been, you wouldn't, like, if I went to the public library in my town and they didn't have a book that I wanted, let's say I wanted Project Hail Mary, they don't have it yet. I don't go to them and say, give me a coupon to Barnes & Noble so I can go buy it there. I have to go and buy it. If I want it right now, if that's what I want right now, then I go and I pay my money to Barnes & Noble or whatever bookstore, and I get the book. Or I ask the library, hey, can you order this book? And, when it's in, can you notify me? But this idea that we're going to not only funnel the money to private schools, but then we're not even going to hold them accountable to this in the same way that we hold the public schools accountable. Like they're able to have their cake and eat it too. They can get the money, but we don't. Somehow accountability doesn't apply when it's when it goes to a private entity. Like, they don't have to show us their test scores or do anything. So I feel like most South Carolinians have to see the logic in that we don't. Like, to me, it's even like a conservative value that we don't give public tax dollars to private entities. Like, I don't like that. Doesn't make sense to me, especially when they're not held accountable and they can discriminate. They can do anything they want to. They can say your gay son's not allowed, or your pregnant daughter, we're going to kick her out, like that. Or your special ed child we don't serve them. I don't know. I'm sorry to go off on a rant, but what are your thoughts?
No, that's right.
About vouchers? Like, how do we reverse this?
So, it's going to go through the legislature. First of all, I want to make clear that I have nothing against private schools. I have nothing against charter schools, but public money belongs in public schools. So what I plan to do is work with the legislature, and if they want to continue along this voucher road, then we need to make it fair. There needs to be regulation. There needs to be whatever we hold public school to, we need to hold the private schools to as well, if they're receiving these public funds. Because as superintendent, I can't just wave a wand and say no more vouchers, but what I can do is advocate for regulations and be that voice. Because right now there's no voice against it. There's no conversations because, that's the agenda. So I plan to advocate for fairness. If they have to if we have to still do statewide testing, so do the private schools. We need to see your books too. You're going to be held accountable as far as where this money is going, how it's being spent.
One,
And
one
private
of,
schools don't want that. So I feel like that's going to cause them
right,
to opt out.
right. One of the one of the attacks that usually comes from the other party is that somehow the Democrats are against parental rights and parental choice. I think
Mm,
that tends to be a big one, and I think that fear mongering around, oh, they want to take my rights away from me. I think that's what sort of fueled the rise of groups like Moms for Liberty.
right.
There was this idea that you're not listening to me, and I will say I think there's a case to be made for this idea that with all this standardized testing and we take away kids' recess, and there's a lot of things that are happening systemically that I do think parents have a legitimate gripe over. But the
Mhm.
idea that they don't have choice or they don't have say, or that that they're going to somehow be brainwashed or indoctrinated is to me a fear mongering tactic by the other side to get those parents to vote against their own interests, so they vote for vouchers and those other things. What are your thoughts on parental choice and parental empowerment?
Well, I agree with you. I feel like that whole conversation about, parents' rights, that's feeding a narrative,
Right,
because one of the things that I've seen, because if we're talking about parents' rights, there's a district that closed down a whole school without, parents being notified. The staff didn't even know. Um, so there needs to be conversations in that sense. I feel like this whole narrative about parents' rights is for certain parents. So if we're going to go with this, you know, we're for parents' rights, then we need to be protecting all the parents. It shouldn't just be a
right,
certain group.
right.
So it's not right that a whole school is closed down. Like, I think it was within 2 months of this, school starting back.
Mm,
And then I've also seen parents going to school board meetings where the school board doesn't even acknowledge the parents. They're straight up disrespectful and rude to the parents. So,
yeah.
you know, it's not parents. That narrative of parents' rights, in my view, it's a different type of rights as far as
Yes.
being respectful to parents. I believe that respect there's disrespect towards parents in certain
Yeah.
areas, and I've seen it for myself. And that's what needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And and some of this is like deeply coded
Mm,
language, and gets into the history of segregation, and it gets into
yeah,
some religious issues. It gets into a lot of things that tap into that limbic system, as I mentioned before, that creates sort of like this anxiety in parents around
mm,
what is the school system doing to my child? What's in the library? It creates this distrust instead of facilitating a
right,
relationship. And to me, that's the biggest disservice of these narratives, this rhetoric on the right, is you're creating divisiveness between the parent and the teacher, instead of inviting
right.
collaboration and inviting us to have clear communication and build trust with each other. It disintegrates that, and to me, that's all. I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's around almost. It feels like it's trying to destroy public schools, so then you can convince people that the vouchers are the the solution.
That's not conspiracy theory. I actually read an article in 2022. The Heritage Foundation published an article and I'll share that with you too, where they have to embrace the culture war
Right.
in order to make school choice successful, because they knew that the majority of people are against school choice. So by embracing the culture war, they're able to, like you said, dismantle public education, form this distrust with public education. That way, more people will, go towards vouchers, and
Right.
so in a way, it's been successful. They've used that culture war to help fuel their agenda. So that it's
Yes.
not conspiracy. There's a whole article that is like a playbook for it.
Yeah,
And I
and it's always about the money, right? It's always about the
and
money, and
power,
then
money
use
and power.
money and power, and let's use the culture war to get people to vote, because it's the only way to get them to vote against their own economic interest.
Right.
It is not in the economic interest of you to get one of these vouchers, because as I think it's J.R. Green pointed out, what will the road that this leads to, that if you believe in vouchers now, the road this leads to is eventually you do enough vouchers, they'll just raise the tuition. It's supply and demand. So the private school raises their tuition, then you end up with an education system similar to our healthcare, which is you got maybe a public option and a private option, and then it's pay to play, and you're going to have to end up paying for the quality education, because a lot of the teaching talent and the resources are going to go to these private entities, and then eventually they'll just do away with the vouchers anyway. Then they'll just say we're done with the vouchers, and we're just because why should we give people freebies? Why should this? You kind of slowly move into the direction that the free market will take care of the public, what has been a public enterprise, for a long time. And so, but that's because it's the only way to profit. That's how these folks will profit from it. And there's billions of dollars to be made.
Oh yeah.
And if it remains in the public hands, it's those people don't get to profit. So sorry, I don't mean to rant, but
you're right. I agree with you. That's right.
Before we leave, I did want you to I understand you're an author. And I'd love for you to plug your book and your website, so folks who are interested in supporting your campaign can do that, and who want to buy your book can. So tell us about the book and your website.
So I wrote How I Survived the First 5 Years of Teaching for new teachers, because I remember when I first started teaching, when I was doing my undergraduate work, I remember reading that within the first 5 years, teachers quit. And I experienced almost every single thing. And I was actually about to quit education, but there was something that happened, and I ended up having to stay in education. And I'm very thankful that I did stay in education. But this book it's not one of these, the high language and all that stuff. It's basically like a memoir. Okay. So, and I say that because there might be some language off and things like that, because this wasn't in my mind academic focus. Right. I'm actually in the process of writing a book that is academically focused.
Well, I don't know how you have the time with the 3 masters and the doctorates and the campaign and
right now.
And the grandson.
Yes.
You've got all this going on. I really admire when I read the 3 masters, I was like, holy, what? I admire what you've done. You clearly care a lot about your own personal learning, like being a lifelong learner. And that to me is a testament to like your sincerity, not only wanting to serve, but wanting to continue to learn to be an effective leader. And that's what we need. We don't need McMasters, no pun intended. We need folks who actually really do want to learn, not just so that they can run for office, but who have a genuine interest in continuing to learn and grow and develop personally, so be the best leader they can be for others.
That's right.
So thank you. And your website again is Wright2026sc.com.
That is correct.
Folks who are interested in learning more about Sylvia's campaign can go there. We'll put it in the chat. And I just want to say thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else that you wanted to mention before we sign off?
Oh, no, I just really appreciate this time. And for all the people who are listening, like I am, like you said, dedicated to serve. And if you are really serious about improving public education in South Carolina, I am the candidate for you.
Awesome. Well, Sylvia, it's been a great conversation as always. Every time I talk with you, it's a wonderful conversation. Same. And I wish you the best moving forward. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday with your families, and and a wonderful new year.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Sylvia. All right, everybody. That's Sylvia Wright, candidate for South Carolina Superintendent of Education. And once again, you can find her website right here. Wright2026sc.com and learn more about her issues. And if you're interested in coordinating with her campaign or supporting her campaign, I'm sure there's contact information and different ways that you can do that there. I want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight. Also, want to share with you a couple of resources that we have here at Cool. One is Cool Yoga. If you're not following the SCEA on TikTok or Instagram, you're missing Alex Del Castillo's awesome content over there. So if you have those apps, just go do a search for the SCEA and follow us on those platforms, and you'll get all that great content. We also post Pete Stone's videos over there as well. We also want to remind everybody that every Tuesday and Thursday night, we offer something called Cool Coaching. And this is free online one-to-one support for induction teachers, those teachers who are in the early part of their career, in the first 5 years. They can log on. You do not have to be a member of the SCEA. Of course, we would love for you to become one. But all you have to do is go to cool.us/coaching. That's cewl.us/coaching. And you can go anytime between 6 to 8. This is not a 2-hour session. You can show up at 6:18. You can show up at 7:23. Probably don't show up at 7:59 unless you only want to do it for a minute. But you'll be put into a breakout room with one of these 3 veteran educators, Angie Brush, Stephanie Johnson, and Dr. Marcella Weinsteiner, who leads our Cool Coaching program and our Cool Induction Institute. They offer this for free, and you can get advice. You can just vent a little bit. You can ask them questions, and it's all free, and it's one-to-one. It's confidential, and we just invite you to do that. And if you know early career educators in your area, make sure they're aware of this free resource. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is coming up in January. I believe this is January hang on. I didn't write it down before we started. January the 7th at 6 o'clock. We will have Lisa Ellis, who is the other Democratic candidate for the South Carolina Superintendent of Education. She will be on to share her thoughts around her candidacy for this position. And I do want to say, in fairness, I did reach out to our Superintendent of Education, Ellen Weaver. And if she is watching, or anybody who knows her, I would love to have her on to ask her the same questions, and have her share her ideas, and any pushback on me or anything that's been said. We'd love to hear what she'd have to say. And so want to invite Ellen to come on the program as well. And if anybody else does announce their candidacy for Superintendent of Education, we will do our best to try to get them on the show so they can have equal time, and we can learn more about them. And then you can decide who you think you'll vote for this position, this important position that will affect education for years. And so the primaries are coming up. They'll vote for the primary candidates, so who's going to be the Democrat or Republican nominee. That'll come up in the summer, and then next fall, in next November 2026, they'll have the final vote for to see who will be the superintendent for the next 4 years, from 2026 to 2030. So anyway, thanks again to Sylvia. It was a wonderful conversation. Hope you enjoyed it. And once again, I just want to thank, we wouldn't be here without the SCEA, the South Carolina Education Association, and through a grant from NEA, funds our work at Cool. So everything that we do is funded from them. And if you're interested in joining the greatest advocacy organization in the state of South Carolina for educators, go to jointhescea.org. Not only do we have classroom teachers, but we have administrators, we have bus drivers, custodial workers, front office staff. If you work in a public school in South Carolina, you can join the SCEA, and you can reap the wonderful benefits of being a member. Not only would you be joining this SCEA, but when you join, you're joining NEA, which is the National Education Association, and all of their benefits. And then you also are joining your local association. Like if you're in Greenville, you'd be in the Greenville County Education Association or Horry County Education Association. So membership is 3-tiered. local, state, and national. And the reason we do that is because in order to advocate effectively for educators,